Okay, good morning. On behalf of the Center for the Study of Ethics, we'd like to welcome you to the 2023 Student Ethics Symposium. My name is Brian Birch. I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Ethics. On behalf of the Center for the Study of Ethics, we'd like to welcome you to the 2023 Student Ethics Symposium. Excuse me, a little feedback came in. We're delighted to have you here. We apologize for having to pivot in terms of the format and turn all of this to a virtual event. We enjoy the in-person events as much as possible, but we felt like the weather precluded us from hosting this, given all the challenges of travel. For those of you who aren't aware, this event is hosted annually by the Ethics Center, and it's intended to feature the best work in student undergraduate research in ethics. And so we have sessions today that combine student panel discussions that they prepared in consultation with faculty. We also have student presentations that were part of a submission process. But our main goal is just to highlight the great work that's being done here at UVU and to give students an opportunity to share and present their work. So we'll be live streaming throughout the day. Hopefully we'll have as few technical glitches as possible. Since we only had 24 hours to pivot, we're crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. And if you're watching, you've likely accessed the event through our event webpage, which has live stream links for each session, and you can access those at your pleasure. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the time over to Dr. Lydia Kerr, who's an associate professor of English here, to introduce our first session in our Media Ethics in the Digital Age Symposium. So, Dr. Kerr, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. And thank you to Brian Birch and everyone at the Center for the Study of Ethics for organizing this event, and especially for working on the last minute live streaming details due to today's weather. My name is Lydia Kerr, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of English and Literature here at UVU. And I'm excited to introduce our first panel on ideology, film form, and the ethics of representation in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, which began as an assignment in my course on race, class, and gender in US cinema this semester. So I'll first introduce our three presenters, and then I believe we'll have some time at the end of their presentation for questions and discussion. I or someone else will be monitoring the YouTube chat if you want to just enter your questions that way. So first we have Camille Bruner, who's a sophomore majoring in social work with a minor in psychology and gender studies. Camille hopes to eventually become a therapist. Outside of school, they work at a daycare and like to read, drive around, listen to music, go thrifting and rock climbing, and volunteer at the Encircle LGBTQ+ house in Salt Lake City. Next, Zealand Despain is in the directing track of the film program, and he's also the president of the Filmmakers Club, the vice president of the Neurodiverse Filmmakers Club, and an officer in the Video Production Society of UVU. In his spare time, Zealand is a competitive axe thrower and pumpkin cookie enjoyer. And last but not least, Anne Jensen is a history and social studies education major. She's student teaching this coming fall 2023 and will be graduating with a minor in gender studies at the end of that semester. In her spare time, Anne is a food writer, photographer, and videographer for a Visitors Bureau organization in Utah County. Please join me in welcoming Camille, Zealand, and Anne.
Okay, Zealand, do you want to pull up that slideshow? There we go. All right, hi everybody. We are so happy to be here today. I'm Anne. I guess she already introduced us, but we are in the race, class, gender, and cinema course, and we are going to be presenting today on Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is one of the films we viewed in this class. And we're excited to talk a little bit about our class and what we've learned in it so far.
Okay, so in terms of media ethics, just to give kind of a quick overview, especially in film, media ethics in the digital age in regards to film and entertainment promotes and defends values such as universal life for respect, universal respect for life, sorry about that. In our class, Race, Class, and Gender in US Cinema, we seek to find examples in film that promote universal respect and kindness. However, we also examine that the films that display the harmful rhetorics of our past as a tool for learning and growth. We know that we're doing something a little different in this presentation in regards to this conference theme, media ethics in the digital age. We're not presenting about the ethics of AI or social media, but we do hope that by addressing the ethics of digital media through the medium of film, we can still send a message about how ethics works within the age of digital media, emphasizing the importance of growth and progress in our world and in film.
So for those of you who haven't seen Everything Everywhere at Once, a brief summary of the movie is that it's about a Chinese immigrant family who are struggling to adapt to the America's capitalistic society and the racism that's developed there. And the main character, Evelyn Wong, is struggling with her failing laundry business and is being targeted by the IRS. But during this time, suddenly her husband from another dimension or universe comes in and warns her about this supervillain named Jobu Tupaki, who's coming after her. And so suddenly she's swept into this multiverse adventure. Sorry, the lights in the room I'm in, it just turned out. So yeah, so she's swept into this crazy rambunctious adventure, and she has to suddenly become the hero and save the multiverse as well as save her family.
Okay, so the socio-political context of the film, shortly before Everything Everywhere All at Once was released, the world experienced the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as we know, originated in China. The pandemic not only swept the world with a deadly disease, but a violent hate, discrimination, and xenophobia towards Asians. To make matters worse, Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, spread hate speech, calling the virus the Kung flu, along with other racially charged expressions. This contributed to an increase in Asian verbal and physical attacks. For example, we saw in March of 2021, a man opened fired on an Atlanta spa and killed 8 people, including 6 Asian women. So began the slogan, Stop Asian Hate, and a series of protests, rallies, and violence targeting Asians, Asian Americans, and others of Asian descent. Asian stereotyping in film has been an issue since film began. However, Daniels, the directors of Everything Everywhere All at Once, one of whom is Asian American, took these stereotypes and ran with them to display them as symbols of oppression, but also depict what is reality for many Asian immigrants across the United States. He says in an interview, quote, "You take the stereotypes of Kung Fu movies or fanny packs or Asian laundromats. All of those stereotypes were true to me growing up. That was my life. My grandfather owned a laundromat. My dad wore a fanny pack. I took Kung Fu lessons. It's really weird to grow up in a time where people are kind of rolling their eyes at my life. A large portion of the Chinese community came here and owned laundromats. We should not be ashamed of that. Instead, we should show the depth and complexity of it. We're trying to blast through each of those stereotypes, which I actually really love," close quote. Kwan played on these stereotypes to give a sense of familiarity for Asian audiences and to give non-Asian audiences an education in everyday life of an Asian immigrant family.
So for some context of this movie and why it's kind of like a a trailblazer in Asian representation. So other movies that were similar with an all Asian cast, like Crazy Rich Asians, which was definitely a trailblazers in showing that you can have a movie with an all Asian cast that can be successful. Being that Crazy Rich Asians had a budget of 30 million and made about $238 million. It's the sixth highest grossing rom-com movie of all time. And other movies with an all Asian cast like Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings, it had a $200 million budget. It made $400 million, which is actually the fifth lowest grossing MCU movie, which is very interesting that that's a lot of money, $400 million. They made twice as much as their budget, but that's still considered low grossing in the Marvel medium. Turning Red and had a $175 million budget, but only made 20 million. And that's due to the a lot of backlash that movie received. Disney movies that star Asian characters tend to have a lot of, or even just characters of color tend to have a lot of online backlash, especially like Raya and the Last Dragon. That was another Asian cast movie that received a lot of online backlash. And so it's very interesting that happened. And then another movie, Bullet Train. It's a very Asian influenced movie, and it's also an action adventure comedy movie that takes place in one location. But I thought it was very interesting that this movie technically made more money than Everything Everywhere at Once, even though they're very similar movies. And the main difference is that the main character is white. And I was just, it's not, I don't know, it's just an interesting comparison that I wanted to make. And then Everything Everywhere All at Once in itself was a record-breaking trailblazer of a movie, breaking all kinds of records with the Academy Awards, especially with like Asian representation, like the first Michelle Yeoh being the first Asian American, or not even Asian American, just Asian person to win Best Actress, or Ke Huy Quan to be the best Asian to win Best Supporting Actor. Michelle Yeoh has been acting since 1983, and this is the first movie that she's ever been the number one, the starring role, the number one on the call sheet. So that definitely says something about Asian representation. In Ke Huy Quan's story, it's I mean, almost every single award speech that he's given, he's made people cry because it's so heartfelt and everybody loves him. But he had a very successful early career, starring in Indiana Jones and The Goonies. But he hasn't acted in the last 20 years because of the lack of Asian representation, until he saw Crazy Rich Asians and saw that there's still hope. And so it's very interesting that there wasn't any Asian representation, but in this movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, he gets to play over 200 roles of Waymond Wong. Some more substantive than others that we see on screen, but there's plus a theoretical infinite quantity of Waymonds. So it's pretty cool. And then they won 7 major awards at the Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Directing, Best Original Screenplay, Best Editing, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Supporting Actress. So they broke a lot of records, and they definitely deserved all the awards that they won.
Alrighty, to dive into the ideology side of the film, in our class specifically, we examine white patriarchal capitalism in films and whether or not those ideologies are endorsed or criticized by the movie. Just to give kind of an overview of what ideology is a system of ideas and ideals that people have, and we believe that ideology affects us sometimes in ways that we don't even understand. So in regards to patriarchy and gender, Evelyn, the main character in the movie, is the mother of the family. She's a woman, yet she carries the family business on her back. That is something that goes against the patriarchal norms of a man being portrayed as the head of the family or the one who carries the business on his back. Evelyn also has childhood trauma of being born a girl in Chinese culture. In the movie, there's a flashback to a scene of Evelyn's birth, and the doctor says to the father, "I'm sorry, it's a girl." This shows how in Chinese culture, families have favored sons over daughters in the past, and how that can be harmful to a woman's self-esteem. But in this movie, Evelyn contradicts that favoritism of males and becomes the lead figure in her own family and in the movie itself. Evelyn's husband, Waymond, on the other hand, has some more feminine attributes. He's more emotional. He has a sillier character, a higher voice, some things that are considered to be more feminine in society. The roles seem to be switched in their marriage, with Evelyn showing more masculine traits in the movie and Waymond showing more feminine traits. There's also homophobia displayed throughout the movie in regards to Evelyn's gay daughter, Joy, and her girlfriend. The word patriarchy also assumes that there's the head of the family, a man, and his wife and his kids. So any queer relationships may be seen as outside of patriarchal norms. And in these ways, the film criticizes patriarchy and gender norms. In terms of capitalism, capitalism works heavily in this film. It's a main point that's addressed, and the film shows the harshness of capitalism on this immigrant family. Evelyn and her family have to deal with being audited by the IRS, like Zealand mentioned earlier, and they feel the pressure due to the relentless demands of capitalism preying on their small laundromat business. Their business failing weighs on Evelyn's self-esteem, and the film emphasizes the negative aspects of capitalism in that way. Capitalism also works right alongside race and white supremacy. The film recognizes how capitalism is inextricable from race and racism. Capitalism, in other words, must also always be understood as racial capitalism. Evelyn and Waymond are immigrants from China, and their experiences owning and maintaining a small business are not equivalent to that of white business owners. As Evelyn observes, for example, the IRS is targeting Chinese-owned businesses. The Wong business being singled out by the IRS for extensive auditing is part of a larger structure of racism. And that structural racism is compounded by the everyday racism that the couple endures. When, for example, Evelyn and Waymond meet with an IRS agent played by Jamie Lee Curtis, the agent exhorts that they should bring their American-born daughter to the meetings so that she can translate. The agent assumes that English spoken as a second or third or fourth language is deficient and defective. And the IRS agent makes explicit in this world, the world of capitalist realism, you're only allowed one identity, and that identity is how one earns money. Evelyn has many business endeavors that are criticized by the IRS agent, but the only actual acceptable business endeavor that is accepted is her laundromat business. In capitalist realism, one's identity is reduced to one's capitalist imposed identity. In this sense, capitalist identity is a genre of containment, containing the possibilities and potentialities of workers everywhere. And in regards to language, the grandpa speaks full Mandarin and Cantonese. And then the next generation down, Evelyn and Waymond, they're kind of the middle generation. They speak mostly English, but they have a difficult time, and they speak English, but they switch between English and Mandarin in their sentences. And Joy, their daughter, which is the third generation down, mostly speaks English, and she has a difficult time with her native language. So that kind of shows the assimilation into white culture and how that works within their family specifically, how that affects their generations and communication between the generations. Yeah.
So next we'll be going over film form. There are 5 types of film form, but we'll just be going over literary design, editing, and visual design.
Alrighty. So first we're going to talk about the symbolism in the movie. There is an everything bagel in the movie, which is a little silly. There's a lot of kind of seemingly meaningless objects that don't really make sense, but we'll dive into that further. So the bagel itself has everything on it, every inch of the multiverse, everything that could ever exist. Joy, or Jobu Tupaki, they're the same person in the movie, so their daughter and the villain is the same person, explains that, quote, all of my hopes and dreams, my old report cards, every breed of dog, every last personal ad on Craigslist, unquote, is on that bagel metaphorically. This bagel represents Evelyn and Jobu Tupaki's nihilistic worldview. The bagel itself has everything on it. It represents how the universe is so wide. There's so much on it, but at the center of it, we are meaningless. We are small dots floating on a rock in the middle of space. The bagel is made of everything and filled with nothing. The bagel is contradicted with the googly eyes that are shown in the movie. And the googly eyes represent being in the present. Yes, there may be a whole universe out there. We're just floating on a rock in space, but we get to make meaning of that and we get to choose how our life goes. And even with the colors, the inside of the bagel is white and the inside of the googly eye is black. You know, it's just kind of that juxtaposition between those two. And the film uses dialogue to emphasize kindness and empathy amidst hate and chaos. And we will watch a specific monologue that portrays this emphasis on this kindness. And Zealand, if you could play that clip.
Looks like we're having some sound issues, which I hope we can get figured out before the next clip, but hopefully you all were able to pick up on the subtitles there.
All day. I don't know what the heck is going on. But somehow, it feels like it's all my fault.
我总是看到事情好的一面，那不是因为我天真，而是必要和需要。这也就是我的生存之道。
I don't know. The only thing I do know is that we have to be kind. Please, be kind. Especially when we don't know what's going on.
我理解到你不是一个服输的人，我又何尝不是？只是我们选择的处理方式不一样。
Alrighty, so kind of going back to that kindness discussion. Even though the movie is an absurdist film, it's action-filled and filled with meaningless random objects at face value. It uses the digital medium of film to bring up a serious need in our world, a need for kindness. This especially reflects back to when the pandemic was especially prevalent in 2020 and 2021, and how a lot of people were confused and polarized in many aspects, including politics. This film, as a media form, is extremely popular, and it uses its popularity to promote these ethics of universal kindness and compassion, even when we don't know what's going on around us. And there's a specific scene in the movie where Joy, their daughter, who is dealing with issues of acceptance in her family, being queer, is walking up a staircase into this everything bagel that's acting like a black hole, sucking everything into its center. Joy explains that in the center of the bagel, you can find peace of mind. This symbol was seen by many viewers as a reference to Joy almost committing suicide due to her sexuality not being accepted in her family. Evelyn, with her googly eye representing the meaningful things in this world and the present, pulls Joy away from this black hole-esque bagel and emphasizes her love and acceptance for Joy. This was seen as a direct message about suicide prevention and how by showing love and compassion for others, especially those in the queer community, we can help them feel that they have worth and that suicide isn't the answer to feel peace of mind in what might be a chaotic and unaccepting world. And then moving on, there are parallels to pop culture references and Michelle Yeoh's actual movie star career, utilizing footage from red carpet and other public appearances. And the storytelling, the nonlinear storytelling in the film mirrors the character's journey of self-discovery as an immigrant family living in a predominantly white country, while also having to learn about how to understand new sexuality norms and dealing with family trauma. Their pattern of healing and self-discovery are not linear, and they are confusing, which is reflected in that storyline, which jumps around a lot between multiverses. There's a fake out ending, which is in the middle of the movie where we think the movie's ending, but then it's kind of a meta moment. And that mirrors the characters' journeys of self-discovery.
So the editing of this film, there's a reason why it won an Oscar for Best Editing. It is a technological feat. So the budget for this film was only $25 million and it made $100 million. So it tripled its budget. But 100 million and 25 million, that seems like a lot of money, but it's really not in the film world as compared to like a Marvel movie where it's making 400 million and that's low grossing. And so for a movie to pull off what all the craziness that happened in this movie with that very little amount of money is very amazing. And especially since this film was made during COVID times, and the editing of this film, the editing was put together. It was 9 people on a Zoom call teaching themselves how to edit off of YouTube. So much like we're doing a Zoom call for this presentation, that's how they made this feature-length movie, was over a Zoom call, teaching themselves how to do it over YouTube. Like, I think that's insane. And the fact that they won an Oscar for that is, I just think that's really cool. I also want to talk about how the editing in this movie is very unique in the style that it's doing. As you can see with all these pictures, like the time jump that was green screen and stuff like that. And then we have these 2 pictures of the split screen, and these are very much a representation of kind of the dual lives that a lot of immigrant people have, of what if I stayed and what if I had gone, like your Asian world and your American world. And then over on the bottom right corner, oh my goodness, the lights keep turning off in this room. You can see like the aspect ratio is very different than the other pictures. It's reminiscent of like older style films. It even looks like film grain, like it looks old. And then on the bottom left corner, you can see like a moment that's kind of spoofing on Michelle Yeoh's career as a kung fu action actor. And I'm just going to go through a little clip kind of just showcasing some editing examples.
跟我走吧，将来一定会好的。我们可以自力更生，走自己的路。
So as you can see, the literal image of this movie looks very different from just this still and this still, and it goes to this tighter aspect ratio, like reminiscent of older classic films.
好不好？
And then you have the split screen.
Evelyn，
And then even right here with that sound cue with the gong, it's very reminiscent of classic kung fu movies.
功夫不只是打，饼干也可以是功夫。
Yeah. So there's a lot in this movie that's very reminiscent of classic kung fu style movies, and it goes back to earlier, that whole being proud of your culture. And like today, this would be considered a modern kung fu movie with all of the action and all the fighting styles, and the longer cuts. It's not the shaky cam, it's not the quick cuts, and it's not up in your face. It's longer, wider cuts, and you get to feel the impact, and you get to feel the punches and the combat. So it's very reminiscent of a culture that they're proud of, instead of acting to feel ashamed of it. So that they give a nod to Michelle Yeoh's career and to their own culture in that way. And I think it's very interesting how you can use editing and to give a nod to your own culture, and then also with the split screen effect, trying to find a visual medium of trying to display something that's so psychological. And so I just think that's really cool.
Okay, so for the visual design, which, or rather the images we're seeing on screen contributes to the overall themes and underlying messages of the story. It kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of the literary design and things that Camille talked about. The limited resources of the creative team allowed for a unique visual style. They didn't want to make a glitzy and sensational Marvel movie. As they say, quote, the motto was less Marvel, more Ghostbusters, unquote. The significant elements that I want to discuss are the film's costumes and objects/symbols. One, the costume changes in the film are striking and purposeful. We as the audience can look to Joy or Jobu Tupaki's costume designs to get a better overall understanding of the film's themes. The numerous over-the-top and unique costumes and makeup play a key role in showing the emotional range of Joy's experiences as a queer person. Through these looks, Joy wants to be seen, especially by her mother, a sentiment that many members of the queer community can relate to, I think. The meaningless or random objects and symbols we see throughout the film play a key role in its nihilistic and existential themes. We as the viewers are thrown a series of random symbols, from hot dog fingers to bagels, to rocks, to pinatas. In one universe, specifically Evelyn and Deirdre, the IRS agent, have hot dog fingers and are lovers. In other universes, sexuality is pushed to the extremes in a crass kind of way when adult toys are being used as weapons and jumping pads from universe to universe. These symbols can be uncomfortably comical to the viewer. This film, by a lot of definitions, is an absurdist film, meaning it caters to the philosophy that life and the universe is inherently absurd, or that our search for meaning will ultimately find only chaos and random chance. But unlike its cousin, nihilism, absurdism suggests that there is value in embracing the absurdity of our existence and choosing to find happiness, and perhaps even something approaching meaningfulness in the struggle. The objects and symbols found throughout the film are intentional. They're not completely random. We can make meaning and reason of the symbols we see, such as the hot dog fingers and bagel. The creators push discomfort and absurdity to the extremes until it becomes meaningful to the viewer, to the point where we feel super bad for the character of Deirdre and her hot dog fingers, and the fact that she is so anal in her job, that her coworkers give her trophies shaped like adult toys. We laugh with discomfort in the beginning and then are crying and laughing with emotion by the end. In regard to the topic of queerness and homophobia, the film is spreading this idea that if the universe is absurd, chaotic, and meaningless, then what is the point? In one universe, Evelyn blames Jobu Tupaki for her daughter's queerness. Joy, or Jobu, asks her mom in a record-scratching moment, wait, you're still hung up on the fact that I like girls in this world. She's countering this homophobic view of blaming external sources for queerness by basically saying there are so many more absurd things littered through the multiverse. Why are we as a society so hung up on the queer community? Gayness, in fact, may be one of the most natural aspects of the multiverse in this film. At one point in the film, Joyce says, right is a tiny box invented by people who are afraid. And I know what it feels like to be trapped inside that box. Heteronormative ideas or the right kind of sexuality is socially constructed. It's kind of the basis of what Camille and I study in our gender studies minor. Now, when we initially presented this film to our class, it was brought to our attention that some viewers of the film have argued that the film is homophobic in the way that it uses Joy's character as a tool for Evelyn's moral development. To that we say, yes, we can understand that point of view. Joy's character is a tool, and we can question the ethics of that if we would like, but she really is no more a tool for Evelyn's development than Evelyn is for Joy's development. To many viewers, including a student in our own class who just recently came out to their parents, Joy's story is a relatable representation of the grief felt by members of the LGBTQ+ community. For that student, the film bonded their family in empathy and understanding, as it did for my own parents and their experience with my brother who's gay. And yeah, next slide. So kind of to wrap up our presentation, where are we today with film and entertainment in the digital age? We can observe that the stories told in film are really no longer black or white, but fully embrace the gray areas of our society and world. Heroes are now being critiqued and villains are being psychologically deconstructed and empathized with, leaving us to question what is truly good and evil in our world, what is meaningful and what is meaningless. Minority groups and immigrant groups are being given a voice through the arts. Different skin colors are being represented more broadly. However, films like this, as successful as it has been, should not give us the satisfaction or the relief that we are there and we can all just stop talking about representation and equality. This is something we talked about in depth in our class. Films such as this should really just give us the permission to begin and continue the conversation. I, like many of my peers in the class, have been disappointed and annoyed at awards shows such as the Oscars because of the lack of representation. But this year felt like a bit of a turning point. Perhaps as a society, we are embracing the stories of outsiders. Perhaps we are finally embracing the stories of those with sexualities outside of the norm and binary. Perhaps we are embracing the stories of women. Perhaps we are finally embracing the stories of immigrants in the United States and the oppression they face. Perhaps we are finally seeing each other in film, seeing each other. Perhaps this is the beginning, perhaps, but really it's up to us and up to the future generation to keep telling these stories in ethical ways through the gift of digital media. And that kind of wraps up our slide presentation. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. That was fantastic. If anyone has a question for our presenters, like I said earlier, you can enter it into the YouTube chat. And while we're waiting for one, I'll get us kicked off with a question, if y'all don't mind. When you gave this or an earlier version of this presentation in our class, one of your responsibilities after presenting is to stand up there for the rest of the class period and moderate the discussion, which you did such a fantastic job at. But we had kind of what I've started to call a spicy conversation for a little while there following your presentation about the different types of things that people see and take away from this film. And namely, there was a student in the class who was wondering why you didn't talk as much about the immigrant experience in that earlier version as they expected you to. And I thought you all did such a good job fielding those kinds of questions. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you responded to that question in our discussion, and any revisions that you made or anything you've been thinking about since then as you're working on this version of the presentation.
Yeah, I feel like Zealand had a really good comment when we had that conversation in class. So take it away, Zealand.
Yeah. I think that's what's so amazing about this film is that it's so big and rambunctious of a universe that it creates in the film world that you, as someone like me, as a white person, a white heterosexual male who definitely benefits in a capitalist society, there is still so much pain and joy that I was able to interpret from this film. It's literally my favorite movie of all time because there's so much about it that reminds me of my own family and the own hardships that I grew up in and my own experiences. And like a lot of old Hollywood used to believe that you couldn't have a movie with people of color because the white audience wouldn't be able to relate to it. And I think this movie is definitely a slap in the face of that. It can be it's definitely a movie about the queer experience. It's definitely a movie about Chinese immigration. It's definitely a movie about family. It's like I like to call it. It's a family drama disguised as a sci-fi action kung fu movie. Like it, and on the surface, you come in for the laughter and the jokes and the fun, but that's on the surface. The subtext of the movie is so much deeper than that, and it's about pain. It's about suicide. It's about depression. It's about so much. And so, depending on your different experiences, you can interpret a lot from it. Like I don't know. There's just so much to this movie, and it's so hard to comprehend into words. And I think this movie just does such a great job of giving representation to all sorts of different experiences between family. Even if you on paper have nothing in common with this movie, it still can bring you to tears. And that's what I love about this movie is that it will literally have you crying over an image with a rock with googly eyes on it. Like you tell that to somebody and they won't get it, but when you watch this movie, you'll get it and you'll be crying. Like it's just there's so much about this movie that I just love because it does such a good job at just telling its story.
It's such a wide, sorry, I was just going to say something real quick. Just because the movie literally covers so much, and Zealand was saying this, I'm just kind of reiterating what he said, but the movie covers every universe and so many aspects of different parts of people's lives that even though we didn't focus on immigration necessarily and the fact that they were assimilating into white culture and those struggles, as a queer person, I saw different things that the student in our class did. And I think that's what's so great about the movie is that it covers so much that it's interesting. It covers so much, but it can be so specific to so many people, and it can relate in different ways to other people. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys. That's kind of how I feel about this class itself, right? It gives you a G credit. So we've got students from like all over campus taking the class and getting to watch and talk about movies together. And these films mean something different to each person. Just here in your panel, for example, we've got representation from gender studies, School of Ed, film studies. And it's one of my favorite things about the class to get to hear everybody's different perspectives on these films. We've got a question from the chat, which I think is a really great one. When was the last time that we saw a film that was so norm breaking? And is there anything that we can really compare Everything Everywhere All at Once to?
I feel like it's kind of incomparable. I feel like we haven't seen a film with Asian representation like we have with Everything Everywhere All at Once, but also a film that hits all of these really difficult topics and difficult conversations like the film does. I mean, the only film, I don't know, recently I saw Women Talking, and that was also up for some Academy Awards. And that one had a great conversation about religion, about gender, about sexuality, lots of different, and of course about women. And so I think that one hit all of those topics really well, but I don't think there's anything like this film, or at least one that hits so many important and crucial topics and issues that we see today in society.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And I wonder, I think it probably has a lot to do with the multiverse aspect of the movie, that it can manage to cram so much. And another question here in the chat: what kinds of interpretations of the film or elements of the film can be interpreted in potentially ethically dubious ways? And do you all think that the filmmakers bear an ethical responsibility?
I think, I mean, like the whole reason why I decided to take this class, and I put that Spike Lee quote in there, is that every filmmaker and everyone that is in a digital media space has an ethical responsibility to what they're doing. So even though you may not be aware of what exactly the harm or damage you do with the representation that you choose to share, you still put it out there. And so therefore it is your responsibility. And being ignorant is not really acceptable anymore, especially in a day and age where we're learning more and being more educated in what is wrong and what is right. So I definitely think the creators of this film were very aware of what they were doing. And there was even some backlash. There was this one character that Evelyn Wong would call Big Nose, where for them, for the Daniels, that's something that Asian people would just call white people or big nose. But in that particular circumstance, the actor that they would call Big Nose was Jewish, which is actually a derogatory term for specifically Jewish people with Jewish stereotypes. And that was something that they had to apologize for and change originally her character name was Big Nose. And so they had to change her character name on the credits. And so it's even like small things like this in this film where it's all about representation. There's still little things like that where you can make mistakes that you weren't aware of, but oh my goodness, these lights. You still need to be aware of and make sure that you are doing the right thing. And I think that's what's so amazing about this film and media ethics. Because there's a lot of movies or TV shows that will like introduce suicide themes for shock factor. Whereas I don't think that's what this film was about. This was more about like this was a genuine attempt of trying to bring somebody back. So yeah, I think there's definitely media ethics. I mean, that's the entire reason why. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Never mind. I lost my train of thought.
I think y'all are doing a great job. I'm not sure if we have time for one more question, Brian or someone in the Ethics Center. I'm going to ask it and maybe we can answer it real quickly before we say goodbye and close out. So the question is, you said that Joy's character, the live stream is going to cut off in 1 minute. Let's see how much of an answer we get out. The question is, you said that Joy's character was used only as a way to confront Evelyn's queer phobia, at least in some interpretations. Is there ways that that could be taken as satire?
Yes and no. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes and no.
Yeah.
I think it definitely could be seen as satire. Oh, I don't know if it cut off.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you all very much for being part of this. It was a terrific session. I took copious notes, and we're looking forward to getting more feedback and questions from our students who watch the recording later on. So look forward perhaps to some questions coming your way in the next week or two. So again, on behalf of the center, I want to thank all of you for your great work. Very well organized, probing, interesting and provocative presentation. Many thanks to you, Lydia, for putting this together. And without further ado, we'll dismiss and get ready for our next session. Thank you all very much.